Welcome everyone to the August Plant Forum. I'm Emma Simpkins, the chair of BCARM. I was formerly at Auckland Botanic Gardens, but this is my first week in a new role with Auckland Council. So just to flag with you all that we will be having a change in chair. So I might talk about that at the end of the forum, but just general housekeeping. If you're not speaking, please mute yourself. There'll be ample time today for questions where you can unmute yourself or use the chat throughout the session. This is recorded, so if you don't want to be seen, feel free to turn off your camera. So today's forum theme is around ex situ Myrtaceae collections. So unfortunately, we've had one of our presenters, Rick Ackland, be unable to attend today, so we just have two presenters. And before we get to that, I just want to play a little update from Hortus. For those of you who have heard about Hortus, that's a Botanic Gardens database plant records tool that BGANZ has helped select for members. So if you are looking for a database or have a database but are a bit unsatisfied by what it's doing for you in your garden, this might be an option for you. So I'll just play this video, and if you have any questions after this session, I am happy to direct you to the Hortus team. So with a bit of luck, you will be able to see this. So, and just scream if you can't hear it.
Thank you, Tex, and thank you to the BGANZ community and the BCARM Plant Forum for giving us the opportunity today to give you a very quick update about Hortus today. Now, I'm Wahid, and I'm the botanical scientist in the team, and I've got a message from myself and Havard, our CEO, that Hortus 1.0 is here. Now, what does that mean? Well, we've got accessioning in place. This means you can create accessions, search, filter, and view those. We've also got images, so whether that's uploading images on your desktop or taking them out in the field on your mobile device, and also mapping. And you can see from the image below, we've got a variety of base maps available. And as with all of our features, this works across any device and on any platform. And just a reminder for people that Hortus is cloud-based. So there's no installation, there's no maintenance to worry about, and there's no updates either, because everybody on the planet is always using the latest version. So one less headache for you and your IT staff. So we're regularly onboarding BGANZ members now, and you're welcome to get in touch. And some of you may have read the article in the most recent Botanic Gardener magazine from winter that Cairns Botanic Garden, we had an interview with Charles Clark there, who's recently adopted it, and you can read some of his experience in taking up Hortus in that particular magazine. So is Hortus ready for me, you may be wondering? Well, we're going to hold a Q&A session on Thursday, the 25th of August at 3 o'clock Australian time and 5 o'clock New Zealand time. So many of you who are on spreadsheets or have basic plant records and who are looking to adopt a professional record keeping system, join us in our session. We'll have a demonstration. We'll answer some questions, whether that's about onboarding or pricing or usability. Join us and find out more then. We're looking forward to seeing you there. So thank you very much once again, Tex, and hope to see you there. Thank you.
So I will put a reminder at the end of the forum about when that is, but put it in your diary, and no doubt that forum will be advertised through the BGANZ e-news, so keep an eye out for the link to attend that meeting. So today I want to welcome our first speaker, Amanda Shade from Kings Park. and Amanda's going to talk about some of the preparedness that they have been working on for their collections in terms of myrtle rust. So I'll hand over to you, Amanda.
Okay, thanks, Emma. Let me just see if I can share my screen. Okay, hang on, sorry.
Good, no rush.
What's happened? Sorry.
What's happened?
Yes, we did plan this, didn't we? And now, okay.
Perfect.
Okay, so can everyone see that?
Yep.
Yep. Oh, sorry, I'll go back. Off to a good start. So yeah, hi everyone. As Emma said, my name's Amanda Shade. I'm the nursery manager and collections manager here at Kings Park and Botanic Garden in Perth in WA, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about our preparedness actions that we've been undertaking for myrtle rust. So just a little bit of background for those of you who perhaps are less familiar with what happens over here in the West. So Kings Park and Botanic Garden, we're an urban park of approximately 400 hectares, and it comprises the Western Australian Botanic Garden and also remnants on coastal plain bushland, landscaped parkland, and a range of visitor facilities and numerous memorials. So the Western Australian Botanic Garden is about 17 hectares within Kings Park, and we showcase Western Australian flora from all over the state. We have a large number of Myrtaceae species represented within the cultivated gardens, but also in our remnant bushland. We've estimated we have about, or at any one time, we have on display over 800 Myrtaceae species throughout display at the WABG, and also this is representing the flora of the state, so not just Perth flora or local flora. And this includes many examples of genera such as Agonis, Camelorsium, both highly susceptible to myrtle rust, Leptospermums, Melaleucas, Verticordias, etc., etc. And of course, Agonis and Camelorsium are endemic WA genera as well. We also have 18 species that are naturally occurring in our remnant bushland. So an outbreak of myrtle rust, should we detect it in Perth or in Kings Park specifically, could potentially have quite a devastating impact on both our collections and our natural vegetation. The concern of incursion of myrtle rust has increased significantly in recent times here in WA. We had our first detection made in late June in the north of the state in a remote location in the East Kimberley. And while we have been consistently undertaking regular monitoring and surveillance on our managed lands here for a number of years, we've now increased those actions as a sort of in response to the fact that it has been detected in the state. So how are we doing that? Broadly or more statewide, a myrtle rust working group has been formed that has representation from both state and local government, and that includes our state biosecurity agency and our state conservation agency, but also related industry and natural resource management groups. So we have people from all areas sitting on that working group. We meet regularly to sort of develop contingency plans, communication plans, and discuss general preparedness actions. And an MOU has been developed to collaborate on some of these actions. And it's really, everyone kind of has a shared role and responsibility under the leadership of the WA State Biosecurity Agency. This is, I think, particularly important to have as a shared responsibility, because it means that we've got support available from different areas and people with a different range of skills should an incursion be detected on our managed lands, but also everyone's aware of their particular role. And we're seeing this in action right now with the recent detection in the Kimberley. So, you know, we have an incident management team that are running response actions both from Perth and also Kununurra in the Kimberley. And they're doing further delimiting surveys, there's plant movement restrictions, media communications, all of that kind of stuff. And currently this week, we've sent our seed collector, Matthew Stray. He's actually up in the East Kimberley at the moment, assisting with further surveillance. And this image is from our biosecurity agency, the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development. And this was taken on a broadleaf Melaleuca species up in the East Kimberley, where they made the first detection. So in terms of Kings Park's role, so we're undertaking standard information sharing, liaison with special interest groups and key contacts, providing up-to-date information on myrtle rust and where we're at with that statewide internally. So staff are kept updated and in the loop on all the latest information, and also training of Kings Park personnel in the ID for signs and symptoms of myrtle rust. And on the ground, so for several years now, we've been part of the Plant Health Australia Botanic Gardens Surveillance Program. I know there's probably several people here today who are familiar with that or have been involved with that themselves. So we're continuing to monitor the sentinel plants that we had selected for that program, but we've now expanded it to monitoring of sentinel areas rather than simply individual species, because we have a lot of collections here that are generic specific. So for example, we have a Camelorsium bed, we have a Melaleuca bed, and it just makes more sense to monitor the entire area rather than just individual species within that section. We're also developing and updating our biosecurity management plan for the whole of the agency. So in the past, well, our sort of different divisions here at Kings Park had various documentation relating to biosecurity management in their specific fields. So we're kind of pulling all of that together into a more comprehensive management plan that will hopefully give us some guidance and identify roles and responsibilities should we ever have an incursion within our collections. We're also training and providing familiarisation for our teams, our field teams, so the teams on the ground in preparation for an incursion and what to do if they think that they've come across it. We're running information sessions as well for our volunteer groups. We have an extensive volunteer group, well, several volunteer groups, but extensive membership. And they're a really useful resource to raise awareness, I suppose, of this issue, but also other special interest groups and key contacts that we have relationships with. And we're also undertaking ongoing development of our collections as a safeguarding measure. And I suppose the more we can learn about the biology of susceptible species, hopefully the better we will be prepared to manage any incursions. And one of the main ways that we've been developing our collections is via our seed collecting program. So in 2020, so a couple of years ago, the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development that I referenced earlier, that's our main biosecurity agency here in WA, they granted us significant funding to strengthen our seed collections of species within the Myrtaceae family, specifically as a preparedness and conservation action against a possible incursion of myrtle rust into WA, which we now know has happened. So at that time, so a couple of years ago, our seed bank had about 13,000 accessions, which represented about 3,500 species, which is, I guess, about a quarter of WA or known WA species, and around 22% of that was from the Myrtaceae family. So this was a fantastic opportunity for us to contribute towards increasing that number and also safeguarding the future of more of these really important species. And the first year and a half, I suppose, of this project, we really focused on collecting through WA's southwest region. But with this, there was a detection in the Northern Territory in a place called Wadia. I apologise if there's anyone here from the Territory if I've completely stuffed up that pronunciation. But essentially, it's a small community less than about 100 kilometres from the WA border, and that really heightened our concerns that the north of the state would potentially where we might see it first rather than the southwest. So the Kimberley region of WA, it's remote, it's very rugged, it's vast. It's also floristically and ecologically diverse, and it has a lot of challenging collecting conditions and often really difficult to access locations. And because of this, I suppose this region's flora is perhaps not as well represented in our collections as that from other parts of the state. So we made a decision last year that we would send a team up to the Kimberley to boost our Myrtaceae collections from this area and also increase provenance collections where possible. And we undertook this trip in late May and June of this year, but it took about 9 months of planning and logistical work. So in terms of how we selected our target species for this trip, we looked obviously at what we already had in our collections, and the quantity and the quality of those collections as well. So, you know, the age and the viability of some of our older collections. We identified the gaps, looking at the species we also didn't have represented. We compared that list against available information of genera and species that have a known susceptibility to myrtle rust. And in the end, our target list was around 50 different species. We realised we wouldn't get everything on this list for the time that we had up there, but the timing that we had chosen was promising for a good number of collections. Just to make you all jealous about some of the scenery that was encountered. So one of our first collections was at a place called Bell Gorge, which is along the Gibb River Road, if anyone's familiar with that region. And you can see, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but these species just hanging onto the edge of the cliff face there, sort of quite precariously. That was one of our targets. It's Calatrix brownii. And this was an interesting spot because this gorge it's a very popular tourist spot. And with the borders opening up again, the Kimberley region, when we were up there, was absolutely heaving with people, and the majority of them had come across from the eastern states. There were a lot of Queenslanders, a lot of people from New South Wales and Victoria enjoying the sunshine and the lovely conditions and scenery. But it did highlight to us how important this work was that we were doing, because, you know, as we know, while myrtle rust is transported by wind, there are concerns that it can be transported by human activity. While seed collection was our focus, some species just weren't going to be at the right stage for seed collection, or they've got complex seed behaviour. That means that they don't store well. So where possible, we also made some vegetative collections as an additional measure to try and increase our chances of adding some of these species to our collections. So on the left there, we have material being prepared for use in our tissue culture and nursery programs here at Kings Park of Eugenia reinwartiana, which I understand is an indicator species used in Queensland as an indicator species to myrtle rust. It's highly susceptible. And, you know, as I mentioned before, the Kimberley region is quite remote. So the extent that we had to go to get this material back to Perth, we had to drive it to a far north Aboriginal community called Columbaroo, where they had an airstrip, and to fly it to Perth via Kununurra for research in both our science laboratories and for propagation in the nursery. And that species on the right there is a xanthostomon, as yet unidentified by us. So after 21 days in the field and about 3,500 kilometres travelled through multiple different ecological communities from subtropical rainforest and woodlands and grasslands and ranges, we ended up collecting 40 Myrtaceae seed collections, representing about 31 different species, and we had 7 vegetative collections. It's a little bit trickier when you're travelling in remote areas to make vegetative collections, potentially when you're away for a long time as well, but we did what we could. And once all of the IDs have been verified by our botanists here, we'll have a better idea of the species representation. But at this stage, we believe around 14 of these are new to our collection, which is really exciting news because it means that we can facilitate further research, you know, provide seed for people doing screening and other types of testing. And just as a last sort of teaser for some of the scenery again. So as we, and to get a bit serious, I suppose, as well, as we travelled through this region, one of the team that was on the trip commented something to the effect of, you know, imagine this landscape without all of the Myrtaceae species. And that was a really sobering thought to all of us. It is a dominant family up there, as it is in a lot of communities throughout Australia. And I guess this comment was something that really kept, we really kept at the front of our minds as we collected throughout this region, and something that I guess no doubt will continue to motivate us in this really important conservation and preparedness work moving forward. And that is the last one. Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda. That looks like a wonderful trip.
It wasn't bad.
There are some great perks of working in a botanic garden.
Oh, yeah.
So please, if you've got any questions for Amanda, drop them into the chat. While you do that, Amanda, I'm kind of curious, were many of these species like locally abundant, or were you finding your populations were really widely distributed?
Some were and some weren't. Some were specific to, say, the East Kimberley or the West. Some were across the whole area. There were a couple of threatened species that we targeted as well that were really difficult. And some of, like the Eugenia, only occurs or has only been recorded from, I think, 3 different populations on really remote stations. There was in the middle week, which I unfortunately had to miss out on because I was isolating with COVID, but the rest of the team, they were staying at one of the Australian Wildlife Conservancy stations, and they hired a helicopter to get them to more remote locations, specifically to look for individual species that we knew were not widespread. So, great lengths to get some of these things, but yeah, so there was a bit of a mix, I guess, is the short answer.
Yeah. One question from the audience was this work funded?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. So it was the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development, which is our biosecurity agency. As part of their endeavour for preparedness actions, they funded us for that. We used their funding to pay for this trip, essentially. Yeah, I don't think we would have been able to do it otherwise. It's very expensive to get to the Kimberley, and just the logistics of everything that we had to sort of plan for. It's very unlikely that our budgets would have covered it. So we're really thankful to them for allowing us to do that.
Obviously, there would have been species that, like you said, were not at the right time to collect. Is there future possibilities?
There is. As I mentioned, our seed collector is up there at the moment. He's predominantly doing surveillance work with other agencies, but he's got his collecting gear just on the off chance. However, there are restrictions on plant movement now coming out of the East Kimberley, which is the main area of concern. So, there's a few barriers there, but we are working with some people from the Kimberley, and that's something else that we did actually. We met with a lot of other state government and local community groups while we were up there. And some of them joined us for a period of time to learn about seed collecting techniques and what they might need to do. So it would be really good, because it is such a difficult area to get to on a regular basis. We're hoping to use more local knowledge and people that will be able to collect for us in the future, and really just kind of, send the tendrils out to a bit of community outreach and have some assistance with some of that. But the plan is that Matt, our seed collector, is going to head back at the end of the year. Less of it, there were 6 of us on this trip, and that's a big expense as well. So I think it will just be Matt collecting on this time, maybe one other person, because it's probably not terribly safe for him to be out there by himself. There's lots of crocodiles.
Question from Trent: was there a concern that you would encounter myrtle rust on the trip?
Yes, there was, and we were prepared for that. Right. So we'd all had myrtle rust training, and with Jeff Pegg and others, we were aware of the signs and symptoms. We had decontamination gear with us. We were very careful about where we went and what we did. It's funny, the timing was really quite weird. So we got back to Perth at the end of the 3 weeks, and the following week it was detected. So, but where it was detected was really remote. It's really remote. It's on a cattle station. There's no danger of tourists coming across that, but that was only the first detection. We don't know if it's elsewhere yet.
Yeah. Question from Mandy. Just wondering if you have specific nursery biosecurity protocols for Myrtaceae arriving on site to spray, specific chemicals as preventatives.
Not at this stage. The only material that we receive is collected by us anyway. So because we produce everything that is used within the Botanic Gardens, and for our sort of restoration and revegetation work in bushland areas, it's all sourced by us. And so having collectors who are very aware of protocols in the field and what to do, what not to do. If there were any issues, then we would. But to this point, we haven't had myrtle rust in WA, so we haven't felt the need to do that. You know, Matt is in the East Kimberley at the moment. He would only be collecting seed. He wouldn't be bringing any material back to us, but it is something that we will have to consider and perhaps work into our biosecurity management plans for future, definitely.
Yeah, I think that's the thing about protocols in this type of situation is they have to be adaptable and
yes,
changing.
Yeah.
I think a curious question: who was it, a member of the public or a kind of ranger that detected that find in Perth?
No. So, when we were in the East Kimberley, we had 3 staff members from our conservation agency here in WA, the Department of Biodiversity, Conservation and Attractions, from their plant diseases unit. They had come up to work with us for a few days, and just to see, they were doing surveillance, but they were also seeing what we were doing and helping us. And then they went back with members of our biosecurity agency. So it was a collaborative thing. So it was targeted surveillance. And there was Louisa from Queensland, who works with Jeff Pegg at the Department of Agriculture there as well. So it was for training for their regional staff, but also a collaborative sort of, as part of the myrtle rust working group, it was a planned surveillance. So yeah, unfortunately, and again, they chop it out to this site, and unfortunately found it.
Well, that's the good thing about surveillance, is it does work.
Yeah, it does. Yes.
Whether it's training or planned or routine.
Yep.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much, Amanda.
No worries. Thank you.
I'm sure Amanda won't mind answering any questions in the chat if you come up with them. So I'm now going to hand over to Damian Wrigley, who is going to introduce a very important survey that hopefully many of you will participate in. So over to you, Damian.
Thanks, Emma. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Right, I'll just share the screen. Is that coming through okay?
Yep.
Great. So yuma everyone, hello from Ngunnawal country. My name is Damian Wrigley. I'm the National Coordinator for the Australian Seaback Partnership, and that organisation sits underneath the Council of Heads of Australian Botanic Gardens. And it's the Council of Heads and Botanic Gardens Australia and New Zealand who are leading on this survey, so presenting on behalf of both organisations. Bit of a delay on mine moving forward, just bear with me. Take a while. Oh, there we go. So most of you will know what myrtle rust is, but for those that don't, it's an introduced fungal pathogen that was first discovered in Australia in 2010. It affects the new growth, so the shoots and the tips, the flower buds, things like that on Myrtaceae species. And from a review done a few years ago, it was known to occur in about 358 species, but it's well over 360 now, Australian Myrtaceae, and that number's growing as we learn more about the impacts on different species, particularly through the work that Amanda's just spoken about in WA. So the spores, the bright yellow pustules that you see, and the spores that come from there, they're very easily dispersed on the wind, but also through the movement of plant material, like Amanda mentioned, but also animals and people as well. So there's quite a number of ways for it to get around the landscape, which is a bit of a concern. So just very basically what this means for the Australian flora. So we can lose individual species when they're affected, particularly large ones like this one you see here in the picture. We can lose some of our iconics, like people have talked about before, some eucalypts, our paperbarks, the lily pillies. But as it starts to spread through the landscape, we can have the full-on population decline if enough species are affected. It also can affect culture. So losing species from a landscape can actually have a significant impact for Australia's First Nations people in losing species, materials that they would have otherwise used for tools or cultural practices. and issues with genetic diversity. We could have small populations that are isolated that have some diversity within them that other areas don't have, and if we lose those entire populations, then we've lost that diversity altogether. There's more research that needs to be done, but there's a lot of speculation, and I guess an understanding that there could be shifts in ecosystem assemblages, and therefore the further decline in ecosystem health and broader environmental health, which I think with the release of the latest State of the Environment report showing that our environment's important and declining condition, that's really important that we do more in this space. So it is found pretty much all throughout the east coast, mainly throughout Queensland and New South Wales. Less so as you move down towards Victoria and a couple of places in Tasmania. Like Amanda said already, it's found in the Northern Territory and now in the Kimberley as well as a result of those trips, which is really disappointing. This shot here is, I think, a really important moment earlier this year. There was a field trip organised by Jeff Pegg and others to get a couple of those people in the Australian government in particular that have responsibilities around biosecurity. So we had the Chief Environmental Biosecurity Officer and the Chief Plant Protection Officer, as well as the Threatened Species Commissioner. So it was really great to be able to have them in the field and show them the impacts. So that sort of led on to some more conversations, and there's a bit of work going on now to try and see if we can get some more action. And many of you might have seen that we've got myrtle rust specifically mentioned in the threatened species strategy and the action plan. So doing some action, some work on myrtle rust. One of those things is a survey on where and what species are held in ex situ collections around the country. So for many of these species, ex situ collections will be a last resort. If they're affected in situ, it's very hard to manage myrtle rust. We can't go out and do wide-scale application of fungicides. It's the sort of things that could potentially happen in botanic gardens and nurseries. So it's a little bit more practical. If we've got those species that are orthodox and can handle being frozen and dried, then we can obviously make those collections. But those non-orthodox species that can't be stored in that way, or don't last very long in cryo storage where they're frozen, even lower temperatures, then potentially having cuttings and living collections in botanic gardens and nurseries is possible. But recognising that that does present a larger burden on facilities, both for space and ongoing management. We can also use those ex situ collections once we know what we have and where they are. We can potentially use those for more research, but also some more actions and projects in the field, whether that's securing more collections where we know they exist, and potentially looking after those in gardens and seed banks. Of course, all dependent on more funding being made available. So the survey itself, it's now available on the Charbag website. So there's the link there. If you Google Charbag or myrtle rust with it, you should be able to find it, hopefully. There will be an email coming out after the BCARM forum today. So there'll be a link in that email from BGANZ. So we've got a download of the survey there. It's in Excel format. But we've also got a list of the Myrtaceae, the Australian Myrtaceae as well, which has been downloaded from the National Species List. So that's got that list there for anybody that just needs to cross-reference what might actually be included in the family if you're not too sure. And what we've done is we've broken it into 3 parts. So the spreadsheet, the Excel workbook has 3 worksheets in it. There's the first part is for general information. Second part's for those high priority species that have already been identified as being highly affected. And the third part is the remaining Myrtaceae. So the survey opens today. So thanks very much, BGANZ and Emma, for allowing us to come and talk today to BCARM. And that'll run through until 31st of October, recognising that this can start being a very busy period for botanic gardens and seed banks. So we're going to try and give you as much time as we can to get that done. We do have to pull together the data in November and report back to the Australian government in December. So that's the reason we've got to close it off in October. Like I said, it is in Excel format, and we do recognise that not everybody has access to really sophisticated databases. We know many people are still operating in Excel. We also understand that you might not have enough time to respond to the survey. So we do accept, we will be accepting data dumps if you would like to just provide us a list of your collections, whatever you do have, and we can work through those and try and pull out the relevant information if that's of help. So I'll give you a quick idea of what it looks like, just so it's not a shock once you download it. So this is part one. There's a bit more to see on the actual spreadsheet itself, but these are more general questions, just to give you give us a bit of an idea of where you are, what facility it is, whether you've observed myrtle rust in your region, whether you've observed it in your collections, and whether you're managing actively for it. Are you part of the plant sentinel network that Amanda mentioned? Have you got support to do more work in the immediate future? That'll help us understand whether or not there's work going on in different areas. There's one in there that I think is really important, and that's just avoiding double counting or missing species. So do you intend on dispersing any of your collections with other facilities? We know the botanic gardens and seed banks are constantly moving and sharing materials between each other. We don't want a situation where we double count something that someone might answer the survey now and then send their material off in September, and the receiving facility answers in October, and that gets counted twice. But likewise, we don't want someone answering the survey after they've moved a material on and the other facility answers it before they receive it, and we potentially miss that important species in between those responses. So if you could just give us that indication, that'd be helpful too. Part two. So this one has been built from the draft National Action Plan, which Bob Makinson wrote a couple of years ago. And I understand Bob's on here today, so if I can't answer any questions, hopefully he'll be able to jump in with his knowledge and expertise. But what we have here is a list of species that Bob identified through that work, doing the myrtle rust review, but also a few species that have been identified since then that are known to be highly impacted by myrtle rust. So that also includes some species found in World Heritage areas. Now, it is predominantly East Coast species, and that just reflects the fact that it's the East Coast that has had the biggest impact so far. This is why we have part three. So part three will provide space for you to include all the other Myrtaceae. So if there's anything else in your collection that you really want to provide answers for, then we definitely welcome that. We have, like I said, provided that link on the Seaback website to the full list of Myrtaceae. There's well over 2,000 species in there, so we understand that that's a huge undertaking. So with this one, what we're asking as a minimum is, if possible, answer those green areas, those first three columns. So let us know if you've got something documented, when you got the original accession, and whether or not it's wild source. If we come up with things in there that are really going to be of use to us, then we can always come back and contact facilities. But if you do have time to fill out the remaining fields, they're all the same as part two, please do so. We'd welcome that too. We haven't put all of the species in this list because we don't want people to have to filter through all of them, but you can copy and paste from the other one and just include the ones that you do have in your collection. We recognise not everyone's going to have 2,000 Myrtaceae in their collection. So after the survey, this will hopefully be very useful to a new threat abatement plan that's being planned and will be developed over the coming months. The first meeting of the Myrtle Rust, the National Myrtle Rust Working Group will happen in Brisbane in September. So looking forward to that going ahead. We'll collect the data, like I said, throughout November. And then once that's finalised, we will make it available at the very least on Seaback and BGANZ websites. And we'll be working with the Australian government to find out where they would like to house that longer term. We do, like I said, have to report back to the Australian government as the funders for this one. And the aim is that that will inform future management and research prioritisation through programs like the National Environmental Science Program. It'll also support the implementation of the threatened species strategy, so the action plan for the first 5 years. And we're hoping that if we can get more funding, that will support botanic gardens, seed banks and nurseries to engage in other research and conservation projects. So I just wanted to acknowledge on behalf of Seaback and BGANZ, the Australian Government, Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Water. So for those that are still catching up with the changes post-election, it's the new name for what was the Department of Agriculture, Water and Environment. And a hot tip, it's being called DEQ, so that helps with the acronym. So big thank you to them for funding this survey through their biosecurity area. I also want to thank the National Myrtle Rust Working Group members for their expert advice. Bob in particular provided some great guidance on survey design and making sure that we've got the right questions to help answer those important questions that we've got for how we manage this in the future. And I also want to thank all of you that are online today and others that are out there that might watch the recording of this. It's the managers of ex situ Australian Myrtaceae collections. It's you that it's going to be critical for getting this information. So a big thank you to those of you that respond to us. Finally, if you do want to talk further, you can contact me. My mobile number is there. You can also send an email to info@charbag.org.au. Brad Desmond, who works with me as Assistant Coordinator, he'll also be joining me at the 7th Global Botanic Gardens Congress in Melbourne in September. He'll be doing a short presentation on this, and hopefully if we've got some responses by then, we'll be able to provide some statistics. But at the very least, we'll be available if people want to talk to us. So come and find us and have a chat. If you're a bit more comfortable talking to your BGANZ reps that you know, then an email will be coming out from your regional representative shortly, but they'll also be available to help, answering questions with how you need to complete the survey. And Eamon Flanagan and Rebecca Harcourt from the BGANZ National Office will be available at some of those regional network meetings as well to answer questions. Thanks very much, Emma.
Thanks, Damian. It looks really exciting, and as Bob has pointed out in the chats, this is going to be a massively important piece of data to inform what happens next with conservation. So if you're able to, please provide as much information as you can, and if you're time bound, just drop whatever you can in there, and the team will sort through that at a later date. So are there any questions about the survey? There's quite a lot in there to digest, but like Damian said, feel free to reach out to any of the BGANZ reps or Damian and Brad, and they can help you through that survey process. I don't see any questions, and I can't see everyone, so if you are waving at me and I can't see you, feel free to unmute yourself.
Maybe if there's no questions, if there's anything else Bob wanted to add, I'm more than happy for Bob to chime in. No pressure, Bob.
Maybe not.
Thanks, Emma.
Thank you. Thanks, Damian. So I think this is drawing our forum to a close, but I've got a few things to wrap up on, so don't run away yet. I just want to thank both Damian and Amanda very much for joining this plant forum. These forums only happen because of the willingness of our speakers, so I really am very grateful for you participating and sharing your work, as well as coordinating really important conservation efforts. The link will be out probably next week, so just keep an eye out through the BGANZ news for that. I just wanted to let you know that this is the last planned forum that we have until Congress. As I mentioned at the start of this, I've actually moved into a new role, and so we're looking at finding a new chair for BCARM. So if there's anyone out there who is interested in joining the BCARM committee, we've got a position available, and I am happy to mentor you into that new role. It's a really great one to expand your networks and kind of be at the forefront of the innovation in terms of records management and plant collections. So please feel free to email myself. I know John Arnott's also here. I'm sure he's happy to talk to anyone if you want to ask us a little bit more about what being the chair of BCARM is all about. It can take any shape. It doesn't have to be how I've run it, but I would love to hear from people who might be interested. So we'll be looking to vote in a new chair at the Melbourne Congress. So that's at the end of September. So after the Congress, BCARM will kind of review how these plant forums run. So if you have any feedback, if you want them to continue or not continue or whatever, please feel free to get in touch with me, and I will pass that information along to the committee to review. And just a reminder about the Hortus forum that's on the 25th of August, 3 p.m. AEST and 5 p.m. New Zealand time. So a link will come out through the BGANZ e-news for that. It's well worth attending, even if you're not in a position where you're looking to change. It's just kind of useful to be aware of what developments are happening in records, plant records, and also to see where plant records are going in the future. So that's all from me. Would anyone
Hey,
John?
can I just jump in, Emma,
Yes.
and just on behalf of the BCARM group, the previous Botanic Gardens Council, on a personal note, just a huge acknowledgement of your contribution to this emerging group. It was an idea a couple of years ago, and it's been absolutely activated. And your contribution to the success of the BGANZ thing has been phenomenal. So big shoes to fill, but just a heartfelt thanks from all of us to you.
Thanks, John. Really appreciate it. I won't be a stranger. I will be at Congress. I'm presenting 3 times, so hopefully I'll see you all there. All right.
Right.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. And we'll see you in Melbourne if not sooner.
Fantastic.
Thanks, Emma.
all.
Thanks again, Emma.
Thanks,
See you-
Emma. Thanks,
See ya.
See you all,
everyone.
folks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Emma.
Thanks, Amanda, Damian. It was great.